This is the column widget in Flutter. It allows you to arrange your items or your widgets vertically. And in this video, I will show you just how to use this widget as well as explore the different properties of this widget. Remember, you can get this code on GitHub. The link is in the description. Check out the link to demo 2. And at the end of this video, I'll also show you the code for this app. This is the FlutterCoach. And without further ado, let's dive in. We start our project on a clean slate. As you can see, this is a fresh project, and we'll go ahead and create this project by going to Terminal, New Terminal, then Flutter Create Demo App. And so let's go ahead and minimize this terminal. We do not need it for now. Then go to our lib folder, main.file. Now this is where we'll be making all the changes, but there's a lot of code in here that we do not need. The only thing that we need is the body section. So if we scroll down to the scaffold, we see we have two properties, the up bar and the body is what we need. So let's get rid of everything else except the body. We now have a nice clean app and we're ready to start coding. So the first thing we'll do is go ahead and create the column widget. This widget has several properties and we shall see what these properties are. And the way to do that is to hold down Control and spacebar and you can see all the properties of this widget. As we can see, the properties we have are children, cross-axis alignment, key, and the rest. But we'll start with children because children are the items or the elements we need to put inside the column widget. And so we shall go ahead and put in containers inside our column widget. For each container, we shall have a color, a height, and a width property. But we shall also add a text property inside where we'll put a number that will enable us to identify each container. So let's go ahead and do that. Now this number will be a bit small, so I'd like to increase the font size through the style property of the text widget so that we can be able to see it nicely. I will give it a font size of 50. And there is our container. Now we'll need several containers so that we can see how different items get laid out inside a column. So we'll go ahead and copy paste 5 containers into this column, but then give them all different colors and numbers so that we can uniquely identify each of them. Now that we have our 5 containers inside our column, it's time to build this up and see what it looks like. I'm going to build this on the browser, that is the web version of this, but don't worry, you'll get the same results on iOS, on Windows, on Linux, and on Android. So results will be exactly the same. But just before I build, let me add the const keyword here. I can see that it's complaining. And we're good to go. Let's now build this. And as you can see, our column widget has been built. And here we have the 5 containers inside our column. We'll just go ahead and maximize this so that we can have a better view. So now I want us to go through the different properties of the column widget, and we're going to see how these items can be moved around, how the column itself can also be moved around, and all kinds of interesting properties that you can modify in a column widget. So back in the editor, first I will get rid of this tab. I do not need that for now. The next thing I want to do is put this column widget inside a container, and I will give the container a color. And the reason I'm doing this is because having a container around the column will allow us to see how the column moves around as we adjust these properties, and you'll see what I mean by that. So for that, we'll go with the Control Shift and R shortcut, which gives us the option to wrap our widget in another widget. We'll go with container for this case. We'll give this container a color, which is colors.black, but then we'll give it a specific shade of black. And when we type in black, we can see that we have several shades. In order to see what the shades look like, again, Control and space will give us this nice overview, and we'll go with black 12, which is not too dark a shade, but will allow us to see what is going on. Beyond the color, we're going to give this a height and a width. And I think a good height to give it would be 700 pixels, and a good width to give it would be 500 pixels. Let's just quickly build that so that you see what that looks like. Then we start to modify the properties. And there is our column inside the container that we just made. So let's go ahead and look at the properties. And how we can see our property options, we hold Control and space inside the column, and we can see that we have these 7 properties. Our first property is cross-axis alignment, and we'll just go ahead and select that from the list. And to see what options we have, oh, that just came through because of IntelliSense. But how you can also do that is through the same shortcut. So control space and you will be able to see your options. Our first option is baseline, and I have not found a good example of demonstrating this to you, but it's very clear to see when you're working with the row widget. So make sure you check out my video on the row, which will be showing up right about now on a card, and you will be able to see how this baseline property works. And basically it works with text, and there's this imaginary line underneath text where the letters tend to rest. That is what we refer to as baseline. So if you'd like to use that in your alignment, then that's the option. Moving on to center, let's just put this in. So crossAxisAlignment.center. What does that mean? Now in a column, the main axis is vertical, right? The column arranges its children vertically. That means the cross axis is horizontal, goes across. So happens that this is the default property. If we rebuild this, we'll probably see no change because naturally the column is centered horizontally. Now looking at the other options that we have, end means that the column will be put at the end of the horizontal space available. So let's just rebuild this and see. And there we go. The column is at the end of this. Of course, our horizontal axis in this case starts from the left, so our end will be on the right. The other option we have is start, and that means, of course, as you may have guessed, it will start from the left. There we go. Our column has been aligned to the left of the available horizontal space. The other option that we have is stretch, and that means that the children of a column will be stretched to fill all the horizontal space available. So if we go ahead and rebuild this, this is what we now have. And I believe we're now done with this particular property. Let's move on to the next property. Are you enjoying this video so far? Please consider liking it and subscribing to this channel. Let's go on. Key is an identifier for every widget. So every column can have a key. That means if you have multiple columns in your app, you can assign each of them a key, and that helps you to keep track of each. I will not go into this specific example because it needs a complex setup to demonstrate. I'll go straight to main axis alignment. Now remember that main axis in a column is the vertical axis, and if we use our control and space shortcut, we can see the options that we have. The first option is center. That means that vertically our column will be centered, and let's just go ahead and see what that looks like. We rebuild that, and now vertically our column has been centered. You have equal space above and below the column. The other option that we have, as we can see, is end. That means in our vertical alignment, our column will be at the end. Let's reload that and see. And as you can see, the column has moved to the bottom, which is the end of the vertical axis. The other option that we have is space around. And space around simply means that you're going to have equal space around each of the children of the column. Let's just go ahead and see what that looks like. As you can see, we have space that has been added around each of these items. And what around means is above and below the item. So we have space above this element and space below this element. Then we have another space above this element and below this element, and these spaces are all equal. Let's look at the other option that we have. Space between is the other option that we have, and what space between means is you are going to have equal space between the elements of, or between the children of the column, but you're not going to have space between the column and the upper end or the lower end of the space available. Let's go ahead and see that. As you can see, we have no space above or below the column, but we do have equal space between the children of the column. The other option that we have is space evenly, and this means that you're going to have equal space between the ends of the space available vertically and the elements themselves. Let's just look at this and see what this actually means. As you can see, the space above and below the column, as well as the spaces between the elements or the items inside the column, are the same. The last option that we have is the start option, and that means, of course, that the column will start at the top, which is the beginning or the start of our vertical axis. So let's rebuild and see what this looks like. As you can see, the column now starts from the top, and by the way, this is the default setting. So if you set up your column without changing anything, this is what actually happens. Moving on to the other properties that we have. The next property is main axis size. Again, this one requires a complex setup. I shall not go into it, but basically what this means is that you want the column to either occupy the maximum or the minimum space available. You can see those are the two options that we have, max and min. Max means that the column will take up all the space that is available to it, even if it does not need this space for its children. Minimum means that the column will only take the space that it needs to just fit its children. So these are the two options. We're not going to see them for now, but we're going to move on to another property. Now, text baseline and text direction are interesting properties because they are very clearly visible when you're dealing with the row. Check out my video on row, which will pop up just about now, but we cannot clearly see them on the column. That's because I have not found an example that I can use to demonstrate this, but it's very clear in the row, so be sure to check that out. The last property that we can check is the vertical direction, and we shall go ahead and select that, and our two options, as you can see, are down and up. Now, down means that we start from the top and move downwards in our vertical axis, which is the default, by the way. So if we select this and rebuild, we will see no change in our app. As you can see, this is what we've had. When we start from the top and we flow downwards. But if we do change this vertical direction and then rebuild this, you'll see that our vertical direction will change. So now, instead of starting our vertical axis from the top, we are starting from the bottom. And that's why the first container starts at the bottom, then the second, and so on and so forth upwards. Now, finally, I want us to combine a few of these properties and see what interesting mix we are going to get. The first property that we're going to put in is the cross-axis alignment, and I want us to have this at the end of the cross-axis. That means at the far right of the space available to us. The next property that I want us to change is main-axis alignment, and I want us to put even spacing between the elements or the items in our column. And finally, the other option I want us to change is the vertical direction, and I want us to select up. That means now our vertical axis will flow from the bottom upwards. Let's go ahead and build this and see what we come up with. And there you have it. We have our column at the far right of the space available to us. We have even spacing between the items in our column, and our items start from the bottom and flow upwards. This is all the code we have written in this tutorial. Remember, you can get it on GitHub. The link is in the description. Look out for the link to demo 1 and you'll get the code on GitHub. But if you want to get the code from here, I'm going to scroll through this code and feel free to get it from here. About this app that I showed you in the beginning of this tutorial, well, here's the code. Remember, you can get it on GitHub as well. Check out the link in the description, the link to demo 2, and you will get that code from GitHub. But if you want to get the code from here, I will scroll through it and feel free to get it from here. And that has been the column widget. If there is a widget that you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments below. And if you have found value in this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to this channel and turn the notifications on so that you can be notified each time I post a new video. This has been the FlutterCoach, and I'll see you in the next one.